And good Wednesday afternoon. My name is Ryan Belmore, and I'm the owner and publisher here at What's Up Newp. Very exciting day here at What's Up Newp, as we have two important conversations coming up in just about an hour. We are going to have Newport School Superintendent Colleen Burns-Germain. She joins us for her monthly conversation with us. And
she had a nervous breakdown.
I know. I signed her up for weekly. Of course, with all of these conversations, if you miss any portion of them, want to share them with your friends, enemies, Democrats, Republicans, whoever you might want to share them with, they are available on YouTube anytime after, as well as live. And they are also available on our Facebook page and on our website, whatsupnewp.com. Frank Prosnitz, it is January, but we're already looking towards November.
We are. And lots of political activity in Rhode Island, not only we've been talking about the gubernatorial race, the Democratic primary, but now that Representative Jim Langevin has decided to retire from Congress. Lots of activity on that end too.
Frank, let's just get this rumor out of the way. Are you running for governor?
Well, that's something I'm not running for anything. You know what? A long time ago, as a longtime journalist, I made a decision a long time ago that I'd rather observe the races than be part of them.
There you go. Let's get this conversation started because we want to make the most of this time.
We can.
All right.
Joining us this morning is Helena Foulkes. She is the candidate for governor, one of 3,421 Democrats running for the position. And she's got a great background in business, former executive at CBS. She was the, I think, head of the pharmacy division. She was the CEO of Hudson's Bay Company. People may not know what that is, but they will by the fact that Hudson's Bay is parent to Saks Fifth Avenue, and was there for a number of years. And now currently is the president through May of the Harvard University Board of Overseers. New to politics? Nah. Grandfather was a U.S. senator. Uncle was a U.S. senator, both from Connecticut. Father was the longtime chairman of the Rhode Island Convention Center. Served on the transition team for Lincoln Chafee, was the vice chair of the State Economic Development Corporation. So those who say you're new to politics, not quite.
Well, it's good to be with you, Frank. This is a real honor. So thanks for having me on. Well,
we really appreciate it. And our hope is that we want to introduce all of the candidates along the way to those of, our many viewers and readers. And we think it's really an important thing to kind of get points of view and everything out. So my first question to you is, and we've kind of got, have we missed anything in the background that you feel is really important people should know?
Yeah, I would start with the most important. I'm the mother of 4 children.
There you go.
Yeah, they're the ones who motivate me every day. I love them dearly, as we all love our kids. So I have 4 children in their 20s. I'm a wife. My husband, Bill, has worked for years at Rhode Island School of Design. I'm a cancer survivor. It's a big part of my story. When I was growing up at CBS, when my baby was just 1 year old, I got cancer. And it's a big reason that I'm motivated to help Rhode Islanders, because I realized I was lucky. I went through that at a time where I had good health insurance. I got to take some paid time off to take care of myself. And so I want to make sure that all Rhode Islanders have that kind of support. So that's important. I would also say that I am very proud of the decision I led to get out of tobacco when I was at CVS. And not sure if you know, but my own mother had died of lung cancer 5 years before. So it was really personal for me. And I think what I realized through that process is it's possible to do hard things. You know, it was a category in our stores where we did about $2 billion a year in sales. And so it's hard to walk away from that. But we were a healthcare company. And so we navigated it. It was a huge team effort. I would never take credit for it. It was something that we worked on together. And I think that notion of doing hard things that matter to people is also another reason that I feel inspired to run. And then the last thing you didn't say is I love to run. So I've run 4 marathons in my life. I'm not so good at those distances anymore, but I still run sort of to keep my brain happy, especially through all of this.
So that leads me to the obvious question: is why are you running? What is it that motivates you to want to run for governor? And then my second question, which is an obvious one, is we now have a congressional seat that's opened up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that or is that not something you would consider?
Right. Well, I'll start with the first. I'm a lifelong Rhode Islander. Yeah, I guess I should have also said that. So I was born and raised here. Grew up Helena Bonanno, and now I'm Helena Foulkes. And I grew up in a family with an incredible mother and father, and I was the oldest of 5 children. And our dedication to this state is pretty deep. But the reason I'm running is, I looked at what was happening to this state, particularly during COVID, and we're still in it, sadly, and really felt like we'd taken a giant step backwards, particularly for women and people of color. I am really, really saddened by what's happening. And I feel like I have the skill set to make a big difference for Rhode Islanders. And that's ultimately the only reason to do this, is I want to serve people of the state. I bring an ability to pull people together to get hard things done. And I'd love the opportunity to walk into that office every single day and say, the only thing that inspires and motivates me is doing the right things by Rhode Islanders. So that's why I'm running. As far as the congressional seat, look, I'm very much dedicated to being the next governor of Rhode Island. And I think it suits my executive experience set. And ultimately, why that matters is I think it's the role where I can have the greatest impact on the lives of Rhode Islanders. And so that's why I'm running for governor. I did get calls over the weekend from many Democrats who were urging me to consider it. I think it's a very important seat for us. But I also got calls from others who said, please stay in the governor's race. And I didn't have to think about it too long. But I realized that, this is a really critical seat. I'm going to fight very, very hard to make sure it stays with the Democrats. This is an especially critical time with Roe v. Wade maybe at risk. And so I think having great people running for that seat and making sure it stays in the Democratic hands is very important for the state. But I'm super excited about running for governor, and I'm focused there.
So let me be, and while all that sounds great, are you definitively ruling out a run for Congress?
Yes, I'm definitively ruling it out.
You mentioned that you felt that the state took a giant step backward for women and people of color with our COVID response. Does that go back to Governor Raimondo? Is that just rest with Governor McKee?
Right.
What have we done wrong?
Well, I would start by saying, we're all exhausted by this, and I'm not passing blame on anyone. I think Governor Raimondo in particular did a very good job. I think she was a leader across the country. What I'm saying is that communities took a step back simply because of COVID, and that was true around the country. But if you look at who really, really suffered through this, it was women and people of color. And people of color were 3 times as likely to get COVID. So that was, a function of the density of where they were living and the jobs that many of people in the community had. And women in particular were mothering while they were working, while they were also trying to be parents and their kids being on Zoom. So I really want to focus on those folks. And as I said, I think Governor Raimondo did a really terrific job. And I know right now Rhode Islanders are exhausted by it. I have been critical of Governor McKee. And the reason I am is that I feel like these are moments where you need a decisive leader. And I think what he really did not do for us is he failed to plan ahead. And I particularly would point back to November when he could see, we now know, he could see that cases were rising. And I don't think he planned for that at all. I think he was hoping it would go away. We all were. But one of the things that I really learned in my whole career, running retail stores and having responsibility for so many people, is the importance of planning ahead. And I like to describe it as looking around the corner, imagining all the things that could go right, but also could go wrong, and having a plan for them. And I think that is where Governor McKee has struggled. I think a lot, it's just something that is in my bones as an executive, and I do know how to manage complexity. And so I think I would bring a different level of leadership to this current crisis.
So you also have a couple of other office holders who are in the race. You have Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. You have General Treasurer Seth Magaziner. What will you bring different to the table than they bring to the table?
I think I bring an ability to get things done for Rhode Islanders. And that has been my whole career. It's all about making things happen. And I think the thing that maybe people wouldn't know about me, because, they read about my title when I left CVS. I started at CVS right out of school, and I had a pretty mid-level job. As I told you before, I had 4 kids relatively quickly. And then when my youngest was 1, I got cancer. But over my 25 years at CVS, I had almost every job you could have. And it was it's a tough place, like a lot of big companies are. And I had my ups and my downs. But I ultimately became president of the retail business, as you mentioned. And I think that what I bring is a sense of knowing how to make things happen, a sense of knowing how to pull people together. One of the things that I would say, if you ask people who worked with me at CVS, is that they would describe to me I'm someone who listened deeply. So one of the things I loved to do, Frank, was go to stores. And I visited, hundreds, if not thousands of stores in my 25-year career. But the main thing I did is I listened. And in particular, what I wanted to know is, what were we hearing from customers where we could make it better for them? And what was happening to our frontline workers, our cashiers, our pharmacy technicians, our pharmacists? What could we do to make their lives better so they could give the sort of service? And I know that sounds basic, but I think that's missing today in terms of government, is how do you listen deeply, understand the problems people have, and make sure you can then translate them in a way that's actionable and different and really serving their needs. And so I think my experience really has taught me a lot about that. You learn a lot when you have jobs like I've had. You take your hits, you get back up, but ultimately you are working for people and trying to make their lives better every single day. And I do think that's why I'd be a very different kind of governor than everyone else in the race, who's basically spent their whole lives in politics. And I just bring a fresh perspective and an ability to get things done.
It's interesting. I was going to ask that if I were speaking with Nellie Gorbea or with Seth Magaziner, except for that last piece about they're spending much of their lives in politics, they would say the same thing about getting things done. Nellie Gorbea says that quite often. What are you suggesting, that they have not gotten things done in their positions as Secretary of State and General Treasurer?
I think that their scope is just narrow, Frank. I don't want to be critical of them. I think they both have accomplishments that are very impressive. But the scale of what I've done is at just a greater level. And, I will say, if you look at voting rights, the state is not where I would expect us to be on voting rights, given our strong Democratic leadership in almost every position. I just sent out a proposal about a week or 2 ago on voting rights, and I'll give you 3 examples of things that we do not do that are very much a part of other democratically led states. Number 1 is automatic mailing of ballots. And Secretary Gorbea is rightly proud of what she did during COVID to make sure that ballots were in people's homes. But I believe that this should be an ongoing process. Every day we should be automatically mailing ballots. Number 2, we should be able to vote on weekends leading up to these elections. All of us have busy lives and busy jobs. Tuesdays are not particularly convenient for voting. So why not open it up on the weekends before? And then number 3, I believe that we should be able to automatically register to vote, same day registration. And so I give you those examples as things that I would be pursuing if I were governor. And I am sure there are many ways that people would be pushing back on all of that. But I think at the end of the day, look, the scale of what I've run is different, Frank. I ran an organization where I had 200,000 people working for me. We did $80 billion in sales, which is about 6 times the size of this state government. So I do know how to lead at scale. And when I say get things done, I can point to many, many things in my career that were very hard. And I'd love to take that experience and serve Rhode Islanders too.
There's no question that you probably have less name recognition than certainly than the governor. I'm not so sure how many people could tell me who the general treasurer is in Rhode Island, or who the secretary of state is, but they do have a fairly good visibility. It's going to take a lot of money to run this race. Seth Magaziner, we're coming up to the reporting period in just a few days, 5 days from now. The Seth Magaziner, as of the last reporting period, had $1.5 million in funds. That's going to grow, of course. Nellie Gorbea had between 700,000 and 800,000. Governor McKee, 800,000 plus. Can you tell us what you've reported as of December 31 and what you think it's going to cost to run this race?
Yes. So I recently announced that we raised over $1 million in the fourth quarter. And this was, in fact, a record for a non-election year gubernatorial race. So I think that it's very clear that, these are not inexpensive things to do. And my team worked really hard, and we ultimately, the purpose of raising this money is exactly to your point, to make sure that I can get my message out. And I do know that I have a disadvantage in the sense that I'm not an incumbent. Everyone else who's holding office today is in the newspaper every single day. And so people hear about them, and people don't know me yet. But what I find is that when people do get to know me, they like me more. Hopefully people watching this will feel that way too. And so it's just very important for me that I get out and I'm meeting people, and thank you for doing this. It's just a great way for me to connect into the community.
How much money do you think it will cost to run the campaign?
I don't know yet. Honestly, we are still putting our budget together, but it's several $1 million, I would say.
And are you lending your campaign any money?
Yes, as part of that $1 million, I did make a donation, but it was relatively small part of it. And I've said all along that I'd be doing that, and so yes, I did in the fourth quarter.
Can you tell us how much that was?
That was $100,000.
And I know other candidates have done that. That's not being critical at all.
Yep.
I presume you have fundraisers that are scheduled as you're going forward. As you take a look at the needs of Rhode Island, if I were to ask you what your top 3 priorities are, what would they be?
Education, affordability, and the economy.
And so elaborate a little bit on each of those, if you will.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So education, I would say is almost the beginning, the middle, and the end for me, because I grew up the granddaughter of a public school teacher in Providence. My grandfather, Bernie Bonanno, taught at Classical. And I have an aunt who's a teacher, 2 sisters who are teachers. I have incredible respect for teachers. And I feel frustrated, having spent most of my life here, that our kids are not performing at the level that they should be. And just to give you a snapshot, in the state of Rhode Island, 33% of our kids last year passed their reading tests, and only 20% passed their math tests. And if you compare us just to Massachusetts next door, where 25 years ago, we were essentially neck and neck on our test scores with Massachusetts, they have way leaped ahead of us. And so I'm very troubled by this. I think it's a moral issue. I think every politician has really failed us in this respect. And so it's not working what we have going on. I think we need a set of dramatic changes that really allow us to serve our kids and make sure that they can have great futures. I saw this firsthand as I was recruiting families to come work at CVS. What I found most often, maybe 80% of the time when I got a family to move to Rhode Island to come work for us, is they ended up living in Massachusetts. And they lived in Massachusetts for just one reason: great schools. And then they could commute 20 to 30 minutes to Woonsocket to come work for us. So I think this is a really critical time, and I'm really focused on education. The second one we talked about, would you like me to pause or keep going?
Well, just one quick question. If you can give me one example of what you would change.
Yeah.
Specifically.
So I'll give you an example. We rank dead last in the country in multi-language learners. And, that is devastating to me. I would like to get many more teachers certified and kids involved in programs where they can learn in their language and really thrive. And so this is just one example. I've got many that I'm working on.
Why don't we go to affordability?
Sure. Affordability is probably the number one thing that we hear about every day from Rhode Islanders. I was talking to a guy the other day who said to me, he bought his first house in Rhode Island 30 or 40 years ago, and he paid about 2 or 3 times his salary for his house. And he said, now I have kids who are trying to buy their own homes, and it's more like 5 or 6 times their salary. And we all want our children to be able to afford homes, afford gas, afford prescription drug prices. There are so many issues, especially coming out of COVID, that are impacting families. And so I'm really focused on what are the things we can do to take the burden off of people in Rhode Island so they can live the lives that they want to lead. And I don't want people to be in a position where they're one paycheck away from just being really struck by bad things. I want everyone here to feel a sense of confidence that this is a great state where they can build a great life.
How do we change it?
Well, I'll talk about housing as an example. I think a big part of what I bring to the equation is an ability to manage and execute. So if you look, just last year, Rhode Island received $200 million from the federal government for housing support and eviction elimination support. And this was about a year ago. We still have half that money left, $100 million that has not been spent. So that's an example of something where we don't need a new program. We need to figure out how to execute on the programs we have. We also approved a bond in last year, a $65 million housing bond, which we spent nothing on. So again, I think what I bring to the party is an ability to execute, to make things happen. And I would get a team focused on programs where we already have the dollars and make sure that they're working to ensure that people are not evicted from their homes or apartments. We also have a situation where we've received 150 vouchers to help people get into affordable apartments. And I think we have used only a third of those. So I see everywhere the opportunity to just take advantage of existing programs and making sure that they are working for people.
Affordable housing is in my mind, is perhaps the key issue in Rhode Island. Too many people who are having difficulty, and too many people who are having to make choices when it comes to paying their rent, buying their food, paying for their medications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Difficult times.
It's in every town. I hear it everywhere I go.
Well, we have in Rhode Island, we have a law, a regulation. I'm not sure how well it's enforced. Where we require each community have 10% of their housing stock as affordable.
Yeah.
And we only have 6 communities that have met that standard.
Yeah.
We're a long way from that. I'm a former editor of the Providence Business News, was for 10 years. You mentioned the economy,
Yeah.
near and dear to my heart, of course.
Mhm.
So I'm curious as to what we're doing wrong and what we ought to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the best way to make sure that people can have great futures in this state and afford the kind of life that we all want to have is that people have terrific careers. And terrific careers start with making sure that the businesses who are already here, whether they're small, medium, or large, that they feel like we've got a great business climate. And what I often hear from people in the business community is it's too hard. It's too hard. And therefore, it holds them back from investing more and hiring more. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I'll give you one very simple example. And I'm sure you know this, Frank, but for your listeners, we're one of only 4 states in the country that is taxing the PPP loans that many businesses took out. And they took those out last year to keep people employed. It was part of the COVID Relief Act. And so those are the little signals that we send to the business community that we really don't care very much about their success. And I want to make sure that we're supporting the businesses that are here. I also want to attract more businesses. You know, this is an incredible state from many elements, but our economic engine has not been strong enough. And so I think we have a whole bunch of strengths we can build on. I mean, we've got an incredible entrepreneurial and creative environment. I mentioned my husband has been at RISD a long time. You know, if you look at what's happening now in the entrepreneurial world in Rhode Island versus just a decade ago, it is wonderful. It's blossoming, but we need to do more. We need to make sure that small businesses and entrepreneurs can thrive. But we also need to be looking to the future. What are the sectors where we have strengths and we can be successful? You know, especially given the folks listening to this from Newport, we are the #1 player in wind, right? We were the first to have the offshore wind farm. How do we take advantage of that and make sure that we're building on that success? I was just over at Quonset last week, and it's very exciting when you look at what's going on there in terms of building up the infrastructure to make sure that we're a leader in wind manufacturing. But the other states nearby us, they're fighting hard for this too. Connecticut is building capacity. Massachusetts is building capacity. So there's a whole lot more that we need to do to win in that particular sector. I also look at life sciences. You know, I spend a fair amount of time, you mentioned my Harvard connection, in Cambridge and Boston, and looking at what's blossoming connected to the schools in Boston in life sciences. And we have not seen that kind of growth in life sciences. And I've spent time talking to people who were involved in the success in Boston and asked them, ultimately, you know, what are we missing here? And I got a very simple answer, which was in Massachusetts, business and government worked really well together. No one cared about taking credit. They simply said, how are we going to put Massachusetts on the map? And so that's what I'd like to do. I know how to work with people. I know how to attract businesses. They trust me because of my experience. And I know how to work with people in the community, legislators, people locally who really care about this state, and make sure we do it well. We do it in a way that we can be successfully building businesses, because what happens when you do that is tremendous career opportunities come. And the last thing I would say is I think we've done a very good job on workforce development. It is a bright spot in the state. Governor Raimondo did a very good job here, but there's more to be done. And especially coming out of COVID, we need to make sure that our kids start to think about careers in middle school and high school, that they're planning for careers, they have onboarding, but also that our adult learners have the chance to go back and retool and reskill themselves as well, so that they can work in new emerging sectors that weren't maybe the ones they grew up in, but they're smart and capable and want to have different futures. So I'm very excited about all this. I think that I could make a big difference for Rhode Island because I actually have practical business experience. I know how to attract businesses. I've done plenty of that in my life. I've got a network and connections around the country that I would like to use on behalf of Rhode Islanders. I want to bring more businesses here. You know, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you know this from your background too, when people hear about Rhode Island, they get excited. they say to themselves, wow, this is, we're wedged in between Massachusetts, Connecticut, not far from New York. How do we take advantage of that? But the reason it benefits Rhode Islanders is because we can lift people up to help them have better careers. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Helena, we could go on for hours. Lots of things that I still want to ask, but we have a whole campaign to do that.
Okay,
and
good.
so
Come back. I think that means you're inviting me back. Am I
well,
right?
you bet. And it would be interesting actually to and I think of this with all the candidates, maybe to take some of these sectors and just spend time talking about the economy.
Yeah.
So many things that can be asked, but good interview. I really appreciate you coming on. And Brian, you have.
I know Helena only has just a couple seconds here left, but we did get a couple questions in, and from former. Let me try to get the position right here. Newport School Committee Chair just asks, how do you propose to level the playing field of communities who do not meet the state's threshold for affordable housing?
I would say that I'm still digging into a lot of specifics, so I don't know the specific question behind the question. But I will say that connected to my point on COVID and why I'm in this race, I think we have a real equity issue in this state. And we've got to make sure, as we're looking at business is a good example, housing is another example, how do we make sure that everyone gets a basic right to have access to the services? And when I talk to people in the community, what I often hear is, I'm a pastor serving people, they trust me, but I want to help them get access to programs, whether it's housing programs, whether it's vaccinations, whether it's SNAP benefits. And so I believe very deeply that tapping into the community in a much stronger way can allow us to make sure that people all across the state get to benefit from the programs that exist.
And then thank you for that, David, for the question. Then one more, Mark in Newport. What changes would you propose in education? If you could just, obviously, people can go to your website for probably a whole lot more information, but if you just speak to one you're excited about or one you think would have the biggest impact.
Yeah, look, I think that fundamentally, great education start with what do our parents and kids need? And I think we have communities where parents are super involved and feel connected and they're being heard and great things are happening. But we've got other schools and communities where there's not enough parental involvement. So the first thing I would do is make sure that we've got parents involved in a very deep way and that we're supporting our teachers because teachers have incredibly hard jobs. And especially coming out of COVID, I would also say the mental health issues that our kids are struggling with are quite deep. You look at, talk to teachers who work with kindergarten kids who just have not learned how to socialize themselves. So I could go on and on. I'd love to come back and talk about education. I think there's not a silver bullet, but I do think that there are a handful of things I'd love to come back to and talk more about. And then specifically, I'd like to hold all of us accountable to make sure that we're making a difference and we're agreeing on the right metrics and we're following up for our kids.
And one thing for next time is certainly a chat about climate change and whether the rumor is true. If we shorten CVS receipts, we can solve the issue. I'm kidding.
No, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, there is. Well, one thing I would say is, I haven't been in CVS for 4 years, but definitely convert to digital receipts if you're focused on that. It's a good idea.
The final question, and I usually bring the fun ones. Your favorite Rhode Island staple? Is it call hogs, coffee milk, calamari, party pizza, clam cakes?
Yeah.
What's the go-to in the Foulkes family?
Clam cakes. This comes from my mother. Yeah, they're like hard to resist. So that would be the way to my heart.
All right, excellent. Well, we wish you the very best. Indeed. We will probably talk to you a couple more times before November. So
I love that. I really would. I appreciate you doing this. I think it's a great example of local businesses adapting and thriving, and that inspires me. So I love what you guys are doing, and I appreciate this chance.
Well, Helena, thank you, and good luck to you.
Thanks so much.
All right, Mr. Prosnitz, and that is Helena Foulkes, and you can find out more about her campaign as well as more about her at hername.com, HelenaFoulkes.com. is
Yeah,
where to find out
good
more.
interview, I thought, and we really appreciated her coming on. We will have her back again, and we will have the other candidates back again as well. We've had Secretary of State, we've had the governor, we've had the general treasurer, we've had Luis Daniel Munoz. The one we have not heard back from, in spite of a lot of requests, is Matt Brown, former Secretary of State. And we will continue to pursue him to get him on and try to keep them all in front of you, as well as following that congressional race and every other race.
That's it. And obviously, we're talking to all these candidates at different times in the campaigns, different times of the year, different times in announcements. So we will have candidates back. We are not, sometimes or often, we often get, why are we hosting this person now? And when's the next time? Everybody wants their favorite candidate to always be up front, but we're going to go through the candidates over and over again, and we will get to each and every one of them. And I will tell you, and I'll continue to tell you, that every candidate has been invited, and any candidate can reach out to us at any time and join us for a conversation. If you missed any candidates' chats, you can catch them all on our YouTube channel, all on whatsupnewp.com. And of course, we have lots of coverage there of the upcoming election. Mr. Prosnitz.
See you in 5 minutes.
That's true. Coming up in just a short while, if you're just binge watching us today, Newport School Superintendent Colleen Burns-Germain, I'm glad you said that because I may have forgotten, will join us in just a short while. Thanks for watching.